All right, chemistry students, welcome back. I am here to talk to you about the concept of limiting reagents, which is a big fancy chemistry term that can be confusing for some students, but really doesn't have to be. And so I'm going to post one video that walks you through the concept, and I'm going to post a second that walks you through how to tackle some of these problems from a chemistry perspective. So let's start with the concept first. So the concept of limiting reagents is that when we combine two reactants in the lab in order to make products, one of those reactants is going to be used up first. One of those reactants will run out before the other one runs out. And because that happens, the amount of the limiting reagent, the thing that runs out first is known as the limiting reagent. And the amount of the limiting reagent that you have limits the amount of product that you can make. So it's important for us in chemistry to determine if we have a certain amount of chemical A and a certain amount of chemical B, and we combine them to make a product, which one, A or B, is going to be used up first, limits how much product that we can make. Because as soon as we run out of A, we can't make any more product, because it requires both chemical A and chemical B to make a product. So I like to take this example from building something simple. And we'll take this example from making a toy car. So in order to make a toy car, let's say that you have these parts, and these are the only parts that are required to make the car. You have the body of the car, you need 2 axles, and you need 4 wheels. And when you combine a car body, and you take 2 axles and put wheels on the ends of them, and you take those 4 wheels and put them on the ends of the axles, you end up with a complete toy car. This can be summarized in the form of a simple chemical formula, where if you have 1 car body and 2 axles, and 4 wheels, you end up with this as a product. You can think of it like a synthesis reaction, where you create this, and this chemical symbol represents a toy car. So, thus far, when we've been doing our stoichiometry reactions, we've asked the simple questions such as this, such as, how many toy cars can you make if you have 10 car bodies, if you have as many axles and wheels as you need? That is what you've seen in these stoichiometry problems when they say that a reagent is in excess. What that means is you have as much of that reactant as you need. The only thing that matters is how many of the limiting reactant that you have. For example, in this problem, the number of car bodies limits how many cars that we can make. And we're making the assumption that the number of axles and wheels is not important. The only thing that's important is that we have enough. Well, the assumption is that the axles and wheels are in excess, and this question assumes that the number of car bodies limits the amount of toy cars that you can produce. So if we look at this chemical equation, for every car body we have, we can make 1 toy car. So if we have all the axles and wheels that we need, if we have essentially infinity axles and wheels, how many toy cars can we make from 10 car bodies? Well, logic goes to state that we would be able to make 10 cars, right? 10 car bodies, and all the axles and wheels that we need would make 10 cars. That's awesome. That's what we've been doing so far, is stoichiometrically determining that the car bodies and toy cars are in a 1-to-1 ratio. So if we have 10 car bodies, we'll make 10 toy cars. Where we're going with this is we'll be asking questions that look more like this. This is what's known as a limiting reagent problem. So let's assume, just like in the last problem, that we have the same 10 car bodies, but we have only 11 axles and 8 wheels. And the question is, how many complete toy cars can we make from these reactants? Well, it doesn't take a whole lot of thinking to realize that once you used up these 8 wheels, you can't make any more cars. So the answer is, you're going to use 2 sets of 4 wheels to make your car, and you'll end up making 2 toy cars. Why will you only be able to make 2 toy cars? I thought that the last question said that if we had 10 car bodies, we could make 10 cars. Well, the issue is what happened was the limiting reagent of the problem changed. The number of car bodies no longer limits how many cars we can make. The thing that is limiting is the number of wheels. So, why can we only make 2 cars? We will run out of wheels before we run out of axles or car bodies. That means that the number of wheels limits the amount of product that can be produced. There are only enough wheels for 2 cars, therefore we will only be able to make 2 complete cars. That's the overall concept of limiting reagent. It doesn't matter that we could have 10 car bodies, we can't make 10 cars. We could have 1,000 car bodies. If we only have 8 wheels, we're still going to be only able to make 2 toy cars out of this. So the key points to take home from this are that if you predict the amount of, if you don't predict the limiting reagent, if you just pick a reactant and you predict the amount of products based on that reactant, and that's the reactant that you have in excess, the amount of predicted product will be wrong. For instance, if we cover up the rest of this problem, if we cover up the number of axles and wheels, and we say, if you have 10 car bodies, how many complete cars can you make? Well, just like this problem that we started with, you would say, oh, I have 10 car bodies, I can make 10 cars. But that is incorrect based on the remaining conditions of the problem. So just because we have 10 cars does not necessarily mean that we can make 10 car bodies, does not mean that we can make 10 cars. The only thing that is important is the amount of the limiting reagent. Because once this limiting reagent is used up completely, we can make no more product. So what the limiting reagent does is we need to take an additional step when we have a problem like this in order to determine what the limiting reagent is. And once we have determined what the limiting reagent is, the neat thing, and as you could see from this problem, is the amount of everything else. The fact that we had 11 axles and 10 car bodies is completely unimportant to the number of cars that we will be able to make. The only thing that's important is the amount of the limiting reagent. Once we have found that, that will allow us to accurately predict how many cars we can make, how many products we can make. So the final point is, once you know the limiting reagent, we can use that amount to properly predict both the amount of product that will be made and the amount of other reactants we will need in order to make those products. For instance, in looking at this problem, we can intuitively figure out that these 8 wheels will be limiting. And if we look at our diagram, we see that, okay, if wheels and cars are in a 4-to-1 ratio, if I have 8 wheels, I will make 2 cars. So we can also answer, okay, with that limiting reagent, how many car bodies will I need in order to make those 2 cars? Well, I'll need 2 car bodies in order to make those 2 cars because they're in a ratio of 4-to-1. And if I'm answering how many axles I need, well, I need twice as many wheels as I do axles. So, because they're in a 2-to-4 ratio or a 1-to-2 ratio. So I would end up needing 4 axles in order to make our 2 toy cars from this reaction. So using the amount of the limiting reagent, we can figure out how many of each of these reactants we'll need in order to make our products, how many products we'll make, and if we want to, how much reactant will be left over. For instance, if we use 4 car axles and we started with 11, we would have 7 axles left over. If we only use 2 car bodies, we would have 8 car bodies left over. So that is the simplest breakdown that I can give in terms of what limiting reagents are. When you're building a molecule, you need all of the ingredients, and as soon as one of your ingredients is used up, you can't make any more molecules. That one that's used up first is called the limiting reagent, and it predicts exactly how much products you will make and how much other reactants you will need. Okay, that's all for concept. In the next video, I will post a practice problem using chemistry so that you can go through the process with me, and that should get you through the concept of limiting reagent. Thank you very much for your time, and I will talk to you later.